Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Welcome back, Birdland, to another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Benny Becker, thrilled to be with you, gang, today. And I'm over the moon. I am ecstatic, guys. And we all know why. It's because Jackson Holliday has been called up to the majors. So exciting. It's going to be the first thing we talk about on today's episode, but got a lot more to talk about, including who is next now that Jackson Holliday has been promoted to the majors. Want to touch on yesterday's win in Boston against the Red Sox, talk about some of the stars from yesterday's game, including Colton Cowser and how good he's been so far this season. Corbin Burns and how amazing he's been to begin the year as well. Got some news on Kyle Bradish, yet another ace that hopefully we're getting back soon, and we will tell you the updated news on him. Kind of talk about how the Ripken family has allowed Holliday to wear number 7. Very excited. First time an Oriole will wear number 7 since Billy Ripken wore it, since Cal Sr. wore it. And before that, Mark Belanger. Very excited to touch on that. And also just really talking about the importance of tonight's game, Game 2 in Boston, and how important it is to take this game tonight. Very excited looking at that. But let's just jump right into it, gang. The most exciting news for the Orioles in really quite some time. Possibly in 2 years since Gunnar and before him Adley got promoted to the big leagues. Certainly there have been big moments in the 101 wins last year and even the year before in that second half, really showing how good they can be. Heck, there's been some cool moments already this season. But Jackson Holliday getting called up to the majors is just special, gang. It is extraordinarily special and something that hopefully we're looking back in 10, 15, 20, 30 years as yet another turning point in what hopefully becomes this Orioles dynasty that we're kind of predicting that they're going to become. And either way, it's just another key piece to the cog coming up to the major league level. And hopefully, I think I fully expect, everyone fully expects him to have a lot of success as early as tonight. Straight out of the gate, because that's the type of player he's been so far. If you look at his minor league numbers, they're some of the elite minor league numbers we've ever seen. Truly. I saw a comparison with a lot of top major league players, guys like Soto, guys like Harper, guys like Trout, all littered throughout the top players in the game. And frankly, Jackson Holliday's OPS ranks above almost all of them. Really, the only one was Soto that he was behind. His OPS was in the 900s, which is just unheard of through 4 minor league levels for a kid who just recently turned 20 years old. It's unbelievable. It frankly is incredibly special. And it goes without saying because obviously he was the number 1 pick in the draft for the Orioles. He was the number 1 prospect in baseball coming into this year, and heck, at the end of last year even. But it's all worthy. It's all because of how he's performed so far in his professional career. And at each and every level, he has absolutely shown out. So we're expecting at least that he'll be starting tonight, I would say at second base, where he will primarily be playing and starting for these Orioles. Every now and then, maybe he shifts over to shortstop or even plays DH for a day or two. But I think overall, moving forward, we're going to see an infield that's pretty much set day in, day out. Now, the first basemans, maybe you switch in and out depending on righty-lefty. And certainly there will be days where both of them are in the lineup. And for good reason. Both O'Hearn and Mountcastle have really been very productive, not only dating back through last year, but already early on in this year. They've both been some of the most productive Oriole hitters that we've had all season. But moving forward, that second base they weren't getting the production out of. And we know we talked in spring training about how badly they wanted a left-handed hitting second baseman on the team. And we all expected, myself included, I was guaranteeing it, in fact, that Holliday would break camp with the team because of that. Well, they had Colton Wong in camp. He didn't make the team. Ended up being Tony Kemp, who they brought in the day before the season to take that role. And Tony Kemp was not successful. No real surprise. Tony Kemp's kind of towards the end of his career. He hasn't shown much in the majors over the past few seasons. And he was 0 for 9 through his Orioles tenure. I want to say he got in 4, maybe 5 games for the Orioles early on. And he didn't perform. Now, he did have a great catch we actually talked about during the episode yesterday, where it happened live in front of us, and it was just one of these things that we mentioned. But we did talk in that same breath about how I believe Jackson Holliday can make those plays. And I know guys like Gunnar Henderson and Jorge Mateo and some of these other players that we have out there can also make those plays. And that even farther, when you include the outfield, first baseman, catcher, we have maybe the best fielding team in baseball. So if that's all Tony Kemp was bringing me, he wasn't really bringing me all that much. And we thought that it would happen, and we were predicting on this show that it would happen at the end of this week into the beginning of next week. I really thought, because ultimately one of the reasons why everyone assumed the Orioles moved Holliday down to the minors to begin this year was for those 16 days in the minors that would buy the Orioles, most likely, an extra year of control on Holliday. And him being a Scott Boras client, that's big. However, there were other reasons, and we'll get to that at the moment. We'll get to that. But ultimately, I think the Orioles just decided that the 16 days, the extra year, it didn't matter. Even if it was only another 4, 5, 6, 7 days, whatever it would have been to get to that point, I think the Orioles saw enough from Jackson Holliday and understand that they're in a tough division. They're in a tough race for this division, even from the get-go. And they need their best 26 men on the Major League roster. And Jackson Holliday is one of those guys that truly it should be on the team. And I know coming out of camp, even when they sent him to the minors, I think if you gave a lie detector test to Brandon Hyde or Mike Elias, he would have said, no, he is one of the best 26. But there's this reason, that reason, and this reason why we're going to start him down in the minors. I also think they probably expected, hopefully, more out of Tony Kemp. And certainly expected more out of Ramon Urias early to this point in the season. Neither of which have given us basically anything to be excited for in the season. So ultimately, Tony Kemp ships out, and we knew that that was the move to make. We knew that that was going to be it. We've talked about this thoroughly, I feel like, on the past multiple episodes we've had about how that was the automatic move. Whenever it was time for Jackson to come up, it was going to be Tony Kemp getting sent down. But as far as I can tell, Holliday didn't even stay down for those 16 days. And the reasons behind that, I could say, are a few things, right? I think it's sending a message to the team. We talked yesterday about how the Orioles, especially offensively, needed a spark, needed something to kind of get them going and kind of get back that good feelings from not only spring training, but also last year. And we weren't far from it. I didn't think that they were gone. I was joking yesterday that it was kind of just a whiff of something rotten that kind of seemed to be over the offense right now. And how I felt the spark that was needed was bringing up Jackson Holliday. That was the number one thing that I felt would spark this offense just all around. Not only adding talent to the lineup, not only adding the best prospect in baseball and somebody who's torched the ball at every single level, including spring training this year against major league competition. However, he also forces the younger players, the guys like Adley and Gunnar and Cowser and Westberg, to have more responsibility. They now look at Jackson Holliday and being like, he's now the young one on the team. So I have to do my part. And not like they haven't. In fact, the four of them are probably the most consistent and best hitters so far the Orioles have had this season. Ultimately, though, it's just the sense of more responsibility that we need you to do your part. And he's going to probably do his part too. But we can't rely on the rookie to do his part. We need you guys to step up and do it. And more than that, I think the real veterans on the team, you want to talk to three outfielders, you want to talk a Ramon Urias, a Jorge Mateo, the first basemen in O'Hearn and Mountcastle. Now you're the real veterans, man. You have a 20-year-old in the clubhouse, and it's all about making sure you do your part and also sending the message that you have guys on your heels, man. If you guys aren't performing, the clock is ticking on some of you guys, and we need you to perform up to the level that we need you to perform at in order to be a World Series caliber team, which is what we're trying to be and what we believe we are. In that case, we need Jackson Holliday on this team, and we need you guys to perform better than you have in the early season. And sure, they're coming off 7 runs yesterday in Boston, and we'll touch on that game. We know they scored a ton of runs in the first 2 games of the season. It was a great thing, but really that stretch in between from those first 2 games to yesterday, they didn't perform very well. I want to say it was something like 27 runs over 8 games or something along those lines where it just isn't going to cut it. They were scoring about 3.5 runs a game, I feel like, if you were to peg it there. And they've had the pitching where that was able to win some of those games. But there were also games that if you were able to perform a little better, if you had a Jackson Holliday in the lineup or a little advanced, production from some of those veterans or some of those kind of in-between young players but not rookies, who knows? We could be one of the best teams in baseball right now, record-wise. And I think talent-wise we are, and record-wise we'll get there. But these are the type of moves that are necessary to accomplishing that. The next message, I think, is that the Orioles aren't worried about 7 years not being able to sign Holliday to an extension. Now, he's a Scott Boras client, we know, at least at the moment. That can always change, especially a guy financially secure like Holliday. Not only has he made money early, but his family should be pretty secure financially. So it doesn't have that burden on you either way, either personally or family-wise, to really get the most and not sign an extension early. You never know. You've seen Boras lose some clients along the way. Hopefully, maybe that happens one day with Jackson Holliday. Even if so, that's not the case. The idea with the new ownership, we can sign these guys. We can keep this core together with big monster contracts. And that's what happens when you have true billionaire owners like the Orioles have now, especially owners that want to see the team succeed because they've been fans too of the Orioles. And now they are so financially invested in the Orioles. There's no reason to stop now. You have such a bankroll. You're already this invested. You've promised so much. You have this core already intact. Why not be able to keep them in 5, 6, 7 years? So that was another thing where I think the ownership was able to calm down the front office with worrying about that extra year of control because, heck, the irony is if you are willing to give these young players that extension once they get to a certain point. Holliday is now 20 years old. So let's say he's a free agent at the age, going into age 27 season, right? You signed him to, let's just say, a 8-year deal. Okay? So that takes him to 35. So the idea sometimes, even that extra control, if you're going to re-sign the guy, it actually might be more beneficial to get to that process a year early so that that contract ends before he's 38, 39, 40, 42 sort of thing. Sometimes that extra year control in hindsight actually backfired against the whole situation because now you have maybe more dead years at the end of that contract when the player isn't performing up to what he used to be. Now, certainly that's an issue that we'll come to in 13 to 15 years potentially. So there's some time to worry about that, right? And Holliday's the type of player that projects to being able to still be very, very high level of a player, even deeper into his career and as he's progressing through his 30s. Because while that speed might not be as quick, assuming he doesn't battle serious injuries, you would assume he still has a little bit of that quickness. You would assume that he still has the power, the bat-to-ball skills, and these things that transition as you get older. So I think that was kind of the second message that the Orioles were sending, bringing him up. And also, I think, with the thought in mind that they want to sign Holliday to an extension in 6 or 7 years, I think they also wanted to send the message to him. Now, we've talked multiple times about the Orioles wanting to create adversity for their players, kind of in a controlled environment. And that brings the best out of a lot of players, including Jackson Holliday. And that was one of the reasons we talked about moving him down to the minors to begin the season, creating that adversity. And I think it did that. We heard Buck Britton, AAA's manager, talk about how Holliday had a chip on his shoulder once he got sent back down to the minors. And we even heard that if you watched the sit down between Holliday and Britton when Britton was informing him he was getting promoted to the majors. That was one of the things that he talked about, talking about how when he came down, he had that chip on his shoulder, but he kept the right attitude. He did things the right way, and he continued to work and work and work to get to that level. And I think that now the Orioles wanted to make sure he knew we didn't send you down just because of that extra year. In fact, we're now bringing you up before we even have a chance at that extra year. So it's almost to curry a favor. We created this adversity with the player, kind of put this chip on his shoulder, and we probably worried that, heck, maybe he holds that grudge internally for the next 6 to 7 years. And when it comes time to sign him to an extension, maybe he really wants to test out free agency a little more because of that situation. Even though it sounds stupid, it could be viewed as the Orioles having been petty and being manipulative with this player's contract, with his money, with his career. And guys can hold on to that. It might not affect them in their performance. It might not affect them in the clubhouse or interacting with the franchise, but it might surely affect them when it comes time to look for potentially a new place to sign. And even more along those lines, we know Matt Holliday played shortly with the Yankees for a little there. So that's even more of the reason why this is not a player we want to perform exceedingly well in the next 6-7 years, be pissed off at the Orioles, and go to New York like fucking Mike Messina. I can't handle that, gang. Okay, I can't. Even if we've won every World Series from this point on to there, I still don't know if I could handle that moment. Okay? Now, along those same lines about proving to Holliday that it wasn't about this extra year of control and currying a favor with him goes to show the Orioles and Mike Elias weren't lying when they said that they sent him down for these 3 reasons, right? They need to see a little bit more to trust him in this process, because not only do they plan on not sending him back down once he gets up, which he just did, but Mike Elias has also come out and talked about how he's not going to bring him up for a part-time role or a platoon role. He's coming up, didn't put it exactly like this, but what he said, those quotes basically mean he's coming in to be an everyday starter for us, right? And in today's baseball, it's not old school. Guys aren't playing 162 games. And if they are, they're certainly not playing 162 games season after season after season. That happens very rarely. So when you say every day, it may not have the same meaning as it used to. But essentially, if we're talking every day as in the playoffs, when it's time in the playoffs, righty, lefty, whatever it is, this is the guy that's going to be plugged in here. And that's essentially what Mike Elias was saying he wanted from Jackson Holliday. So, again, it proved to show, since the Orioles did not wait for the even 16 days. And again, they were only a few days away probably under 5 days away from accomplishing that goal. Okay? They wanted to prove that sending him down to the minors was for him to work on and for them to see these three things, which was improved strikeout to walk ratio, which is something that he excelled at every level of the minors and really only had a red flag based off of this spring training when it was a big red flag. However, even in spring training, his numbers were still unbelievably outstanding to the point that you can get past a crappy strikeout to walk ratio if he's putting up hits and extra base hits and home runs and steals and doing everything else. You can get past that strikeout to walk ratio. They also wanted to make sure he got extra reps at second base. In spring training, listen, you can't manufacture these situations in game. And while you can run it on the backfields and during practice all you want to make sure he can do things like turn a double play from second base properly, consistently, in game situations. And that was something that at least halfway through camp, we hadn't seen him do yet. Now, I don't know how many opportunities he got at the back half of the camp, but I know that was something, especially the Orioles wanted to see him do in game situations multiple times to be able to trust that he could consistently do it in the majors, in the games. Now, they saw it on the backfield. They talked about how it looked like he had been doing this his whole life, right? So Tony Mansolino, I believe, said that. So it's not surprising that it didn't take much game reps to watch it for them to trust that he's going to be able to do it consistently in the game. And the last thing was hitting left-handed pitching. Now, that's something I feel like he did very well this spring training. Again, maybe the strikeout to walk ratio was a little wonky, but overall, the results and the extra base hits and the on base and all of these things, even in spring training against lefties, were very impressive. And he went down to the minors and just showed that all three of those aspects he checked off. And the Orioles said, you know what? We saw all we need to see to trust this man in the major leagues and trust that he can do everything we need him to do and that he's going to help this team excel past the expectations of basically everyone out there because he is special, gang. He really is. The skill set that this man has is unbelievable. And the idea that he's only 20 years old, now the second youngest baseball player in the majors right now, special, gang. It's special. It's what Orioles baseball is becoming now. It is unbelievably special. And we talked about him wearing number 7, and we're going to touch on that a little later on the episode because that's something that's really just shows how special of a talent he is because they wouldn't give that just to anybody. In fact, they haven't given that to anybody in quite some time. So we'll get to all of that. Ultimately, though, Jackson Holliday coming up is a monster upgrade for the roster. Like I said, Tony Kemp gets designated for assignment. Most likely we lose Tony Kemp. I'm not sure. Maybe he chooses his outright release. Maybe he winds up passing through waivers and accepting a minor league position, and he'll be back at some point potentially in the season. I doubt that's the case, frankly. And we talked about other minor leaguers coming up soon. And that's going to be our next topic that we get to before the recap of yesterday's game. But ultimately, this is a monster upgrade on the 26-man roster. When you look at the offense, when you pencil in the lineup, I mean, when you see Holliday in there, I promise you it's going to worry more teams, create more great situations and runs and hits for the Orioles than Tony Kemp was ever doing for us. So, listen, gang, we talked yesterday about this offense needing a spark, and Jackson Holliday was that spark coming. We got him about a week early. Got him about 5 days earlier than I was predicting, but he is here. He's a major leaguer. He's a Baltimore Oriole, and I fully believe he'll be in the lineup tonight in Boston. Heck, dead real. When I heard this news last night, I instantly got on my phone and started looking at flights and tickets and hotels in Boston tonight. I couldn't pull it off, gang. I couldn't pull it off. I thought we were going to be doing this one live from Boston. But ultimately, I can't wait to go down and see Jackson Holliday as an Oriole. And hopefully him, along with a lot of other guys in this core, are an Oriole for a very long time moving forward. And we have a lot of successful and great moments with these guys a part of the team. Future's here, gang. The future is here. And along those lines, the only question now is, who's next? Who's next? Who's the next one coming up? Is it Connor Norby? Is it Kobe Mayo? Is it Heston Kjerstad? Is it Kyle Stowers? Is it one of these pitchers? Gang, I don't have the exact answer for you. I think I do. My gut's telling me what I've been telling you the last few episodes, which is Connor Norby is the name that's next to come up. And ultimately, that's because the guy he's going to replace, I believe, is struggling so mightily. And if he can't turn it around, and that guy is Ramon Urias, if he can't turn this around in the next week, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, he's gone. And I'm sorry, but the writing is on the wall right now for Ramon Urias, and I believe he knows it. Again, this is the type of move that's signaling to him. You need to perform, Ramon. We need you to perform, or else we have guys to replace you with. And I think he was lucky. I think Ramon Urias is lucky that the Orioles didn't choose to wait those full 16 days to bring Jackson Holliday up. Because I believe, and I've seen a lot of teams do this over the years, they bring these prospects up in pairs. So I believe had they waited, let's say, the rest of this week and Ramon continued to struggle the rest of this week, not only was Tony Kemp gone, but I think Ramon Urias might have been gone too. In which case, I think Holliday and Norby would have been coming up together. In which case, I still think the time is ticking and the opportunities are dwindling for Ramon Urias. We need to see him perform. And frankly, his opportunities have absolutely already dwindled down, at least slightly, with the addition of Jackson Holliday. Because now you're going to have Gunnar at short, Jackson at second, Westberg at third, and obviously one of the two guys at first base. Almost every night. I mean, I'm sorry, but now your opportunities, you might come in as a defensive replacement, maybe for Westberg at third. Okay, I could see that move, but then what? What am I diminishing your value to? You're playing now every so often. If anything, maybe it buys him a little more time than a week or two, just because the Orioles have their basic everyday starters around the infield, just like they pretty much have it in the outfield as well. Even though Colton Cowser has been performing so well, and we'll touch on that he's maybe starting to creep into everyday territory too. Now, the nice part there is Cowser can play all three outfield positions, right? Meaning that technically he could be an everyday player because you could get one of the guys an off day. So let's just say game 1, Hayes has an off day. Game 2, Mullins has an off day. Game 3, Taters has an off day. Or maybe you move Taters to the DH role and play Cowser and Wright that day. So, and then right there, maybe the 4th day, Cowser's on the bench. And that way he's playing 3 out of every 4 games. And so is everybody else in the outfield. And so you kind of have this natural everyday player rotation sort of thing going on. But that's not necessarily going to be the case with Ramon Urias in this infield, because Ramon can't play short. Sure, he can play first, second, and third. However, first, you already have 2 guys that are taking everyday reps between them at first, and successfully, I might add. So unless they both hit a mighty cold streak, Ramon's not really going to get any time at first. And frankly, Taters probably has more of a chance at playing first base than Ramon does, simply, again, just because of who's actually been hitting well and who do you want to keep in the lineup more, right? So that's a more realistic. So now you're down to what, second and third? Okay, well, again, Holliday's at second, Westberg's at third. Okay, maybe Urias is the backup third baseman now, okay? But as far as second base goes, Westberg is also probably the backup second baseman. So I don't know exactly how you're going to run it. Again, everyday player now means, having probably at least one off day, if not more, a week. That's just the way the baseball world works nowadays. But still, opportunities are dwindling for Ramon Urias. And now just the amount of opportunities you are going to get moving forward are less than you had before. So you really, if you're Ramon Urias, need to capitalize and quickly on those opportunities that you get moving forward. And we've seen him in the past be very clutch. In fact, the last couple years, he's been one of the most clutch Orioles at the plate. So in those pinch hit situations that he winds up getting himself into a game, or when he comes in as a defensive replacement and the game gets extended and he winds up with an at-bat or two, these are the situations he needs to take full advantage of. And yesterday he went 0 for at the plate, again, I believe in 4 plate appearances, maybe even more, frankly, the fact that they put up 7 runs. I didn't even look at the box score when it came to Ramon Urias, but there's a good chance he was 0 for 5 yesterday. So the opportunities are very much dwindling for Ramon Urias. And that makes me believe that Connor Norby's the next one up. Now, some people would say, hey, Kobe Mayo's the natural fit to take Urias' place. I push back on that. I actually think Norby, who can play short, he can play second, I believe he can play third, and I know he can play the corner outfields, provides more for this team than Kobe Mayo does in the short term. And Norby's had more experience in the minors. He's possibly even had better numbers overall than Mayo in the minors. And at the very least has started pretty much just as hot, if not more hot, than Kobe Mayo so far. So I think Connor Norby is really the next name that the Orioles should bring up. However, the way Heston Kjerstad is hitting, he could easily be the next one. The problem there is just whose position does he take, right? Because outside of an injury, I don't see how the Orioles make room for Heston Kjerstad. Because if they made the move for Heston for Ramon Urias, the problem there is just now those everyday guys are really everyday guys as far as the infield goes. You're adding a third player to that mix, if not fourth player to that mix at first base, if not fifth player. But if he takes Ramon's spot, let's keep it at 4, okay? But between Mountie, O'Hearn, Santander, and then Heston, and again, same can go for the corner outfield spots. I mean, already we talked about how Kowser's playing so well, he's basically pushing himself to an everyday player, despite the fact that the Orioles have 3 everyday outfielders already. So you add a 4th guy in Heston, it's just tougher for them to really find those reps, truly. Oh, and along the lines of second base, I forgot Mateo is also one of the backup second basemen, along with the backup shortstop. So if you're playing Mateo, let's say, at short that day, while the Orioles don't want to do this a ton this season, they could very easily move Gunnar to third, too. So it's just one of these situations where I don't know where Ramon Urias really fits into this team at the moment, especially if he can't perform. So while I think Connor Norby's the better name to take that position, Heston Kjerstad and how he's performed so far deserves to get called up very soon. Again, I just don't know whose position he's going to take. I don't. Outside of an injury or two, I just don't see where Heston can come up on this team right now, unfortunately. And again, Kobe Mayo kind of goes to the same regard. You could talk Kobe Mayo over Connor Norby when it comes to replacing Ramon Urias, and I'd understand that. I think the Orioles would rather have Connor Norby and his utility spots to help cover rather than Mayo's first and third, or third and first, if you want to call it. And I think Mayo's played a little bit of corner outfield too, so it wouldn't be the biggest surprise to have him come up and help in left field or right field here and there. But ultimately, that's not where the Orioles want to play him. And I really think moving forward, Connor Norby's the next name. Now, Kyle Stowers had an unbelievable camp, but he falls in the exact same category as Heston Kjerstad. Maybe a little better in the field, maybe can play a little more center field, but you don't want Stowers living in center field. And certainly, Kauser and Mateo, probably even, are better options in center field than Kyle Stowers. Certainly, Colin Kauser, I believe, is a better option there. So, Stowers then becomes, the third, maybe fourth center fielder. I just don't think it's a necessity or something that the Orioles really are going to find a way to get the roster spot open for him in the sense of starting every day. It's funny, I read an article yesterday talking hypothetical moves that the Orioles could make for these type of players. And the one for Stowers was trading Austin Hayes, which we've talked about. We've mentioned how that's a possibility, and we talked about how that's certainly something I could see being in the Orioles' benefit, despite the fact I love Hayes. I think he's a good ball player. I love how he goes no batting gloves, old school. Certainly was an all-star for us last year. But the trade I want to see involving Austin Hayes and potentially Kyle Stowers would be for a Mike Trout, or just Mike Trout. And I talked about that hypothetical trade not too long ago with you folks, and those were the top two pieces, because that makes the most sense to me as far as the Angels trading Trout, getting an everyday outfielder in Austin Hayes, a major league veteran who's not that old, still has a year of control after this one, and is looking for a reasonable extension. Along with that, you give them another outfielder who should be in the majors, but has just been blocked because the Orioles have been so good at that position in Kyle Stowers, and somebody who's excelling not just this spring, but also so far this minor league season. And because of that, I think packaging those two at the top of a Mike Trout deal looks very, very interesting if you're the Angels. And again, we would need to throw some serious players. I dropped the names Seth Johnson, our third best pitching prospect. And again, a guy who very likely could be on a major league roster this season if the Orioles weren't so deep at starting pitcher. And then a guy like Max Wagner or Mac Horvath. And one of these other players. I know Horvath was drafted as an outfielder. I think they have him listed now as an infielder. But I think he's just very versatile, whereas Wagner's more of that corner infield position and third base, first base. I do believe that would make more sense in giving them this young, talented, highly drafted infield prospect, along with the top pitching, one of the top pitching prospects, one of the top outfield prospects, and that everyday major league veteran who's not too old, Austin Hayes, outfielder. So that was something I talked about a few episodes ago, and I think has a lot of steam. So as far as the pitchers go, I just don't think the spot is there. I don't think the room is there. If anything, one of the pitching prospects I think has the best chance at making the jump is somebody like Baumeister, or however you pronounce his name, who's one of their best relieving prospects. Because I could see, despite the fact that this bullpen has been pretty strong early on, them wanting to upgrade the bullpen with one of these young studs that they have developing and growing. Still, I think that because of how good the starters and bullpen have performed so far, there's no rush in those additions other than what we talked about yesterday, which is if we can make an addition to that closer role in the near future. And maybe that's unfair again because Craig Kimbrell has relatively done pretty well for us. But it just doesn't have the best vibe, I feel like, at the moment, too. The back end, you're still a little weary. Yesterday, we were lucky to extend that lead so far that we didn't need the closer. So we didn't have to worry about that. And that's a great thing. And if the offense is hitting at its best, that's going to happen a lot. Still, in the playoffs, you want to make sure you have that solidified back end of the bullpen to the closest to Felix Bautista that we can get. And I'm not expecting to fully replace Bautista this season because there is no replacing the best, except with something a little worse, if not a lot worse. And again, we talked yesterday about that, so I'm not going to dig too much into it, but that's as far as when the question is who's next. If I'm giving you the answer, it's Connor Norby, and the guy going down or leaving would be Ramon Urias. But if Urias can pick it back up, that might not happen for quite some time. Again, Jackson Holliday alone might be the spark the Orioles offense needed. And frankly, the reality check of losing those last 2 games in Pittsburgh, I think might have just been a spark enough, as we saw yesterday. Now, digging into the game yesterday, and I mentioned this on yesterday's episode, that the Orioles got at least times a little lucky in that win yesterday. However, by the end of it, it looked like a solid win because clearly you win 7-1. Even if you get a few runs off of errors or bad plays, you still ultimately put up a lot more runs than the other team. And not all of them were lucky, and not all of them were on poor play by the Red Sox. So let's just dig into the game real quick. It's not going to be the most tremendous breakdown. Again, Jackson Holliday was the primary thing I wanted to talk about. So yesterday's game in Boston was another interesting one. It was the 3rd time this season that the Orioles have had like an, quote, opening day celebration. We had the one in Camden Yards on true opening day. We had one in Pittsburgh to open up last series at their home opener. And then yesterday, we had yet another one in Boston against the Red Sox. And this one was even more crazy maybe than the other 2, or almost definitely than the other 2. Because not only were they celebrating the 20th year anniversary of the Red Sox finally breaking the curse and winning the World Series back in 2004, but they also were honoring longtime legendary pitcher and knuckleballer Tim Wakefield, who passed away. And so there was a lot of emotions going on. You had a ton of alumni there. You had Wakefield's daughters throwing out the first pitch to Veritek. Like, it was just kind of this special scene. And that's very tough on teams to perform after that. Now, I always have the belief, truly, that it actually affects the home team negatively on days like that, because it's very emotional, first off, even if they weren't teammates of Wakefield, and even if they weren't around for the 2004 World Series, obviously these guys weren't, it still is part of the Red Sox lore. It's part of the history. You're still around it. You have to do media talking about it. You have to, you feel the emotions in the crowd. You see these people in the crowd, whether it was for the World Series or for Wakefield or for both, the idea of the emotions and tears that are flowing through that stadium pregame. And it gets the best of you sometimes. Now, I always talk as a gambler, if a team is coming off, let's say, a World Series championship, and they're receiving their rings and raising the banner that day, odds are they're going to lose. Because, again, that's so emotional for those group of guys. And while yesterday wasn't that same thing, it still was such a bundle of emotions in Boston that really it was tough for both teams, I believe. But certainly, again, my instincts are to tell me that the home team in that situation is more affected by those things negatively than positively. And sometimes it goes the other way. For instance, talk about the Red Sox, and I feel like they always play the Orioles every year on this day, but the Patriots game day, or the Patriots Day game, where they have it at like 11, it's the day the Boston Marathon goes off, and it's a big holiday in Boston. That's one of those I always feel like the Red Sox win. And like I said, I feel like a lot of years the Orioles have been the team in Boston playing them that day. But that's the sort of game where it goes the other way. I don't have an exact math or formula behind it. This is all just sense. But that was the type of atmosphere, let's say, yesterday at Fenway Park before the game. A lot of emotions, a lot of pregame, all sorts of stuff along those lines. So Corbin Burnes was pitching. We talked yesterday about how he got pushed up in the rotation a day early to keep him on schedule and pitch that first game. And he was lights out. He was amazing, gang. Other than a solo home run in the first inning to the third batter of the game. It's funny. It felt like opening day. Talk about opening day vibes. Felt like opening day, how he gave up that home run to Trout, the third batter of the game, and then essentially just mowed through the rest of the lineup for the rest of his day. That's essentially what Corbin Burnes did. Like I said, solo home run in the third. The next batter got a single. Other than that, the Red Sox got no hits, 2 walks over the next 6 innings. Corbin Burnes officially gets 7 innings, tying Kramer for the most by an Orioles starting pitcher in this young season. And that one by Dean Kremer was on Sunday, the last game in the Pirates series that they faltered and couldn't win. This one, first game of the Red Sox. So back-to-back days by Orioles starters getting 7 innings pitched. It's a beautiful thing to see. We saw some of these guys, got taken out maybe a little earlier in the season, including Corbin Burnes himself. Maybe even low pitch counts. Some of them were getting pulled at 85-ish pitches and probably had another inning or so left in them. It's all right not pushing them through that early, but certainly the Orioles are looking to push for that division and 1 seed and World Series. So making sure your pitchers can perform through 6-7 innings is so important. And Corbin Burnes just showed why he's the ace, gang. He really did. And we'll get to his full stat line a little later, but he had an amazing day. Again, he gave up those 2 hits, including the solo home run in the first inning. Didn't give up another hit and only gave up 2 walks the rest of his day through 7. Unbelievable. As far as how the game went down, again, Tyler O'Neill hit that first inning home run to put the Red Sox up 1-0 in the bottom of the first. Orioles, though, tie it in the top of the second with a Cowser RBI double, scoring Mullins, believe, smashed against the Green Monster. And he was really smashing the ball all day. Cowser had a tremendous day at the plate. And we'll break down not only his day at the plate, but also his tremendous start so far this season after we get through this games. The next one was the Orioles taking the lead, and this is really one of the ways that the Orioles got lucky in this game. And this is one of the things I was talking about, how, we might have lucked out a little bit yesterday, where Boston kind of had some sloppy defense. So Mountcastle hit a ball hard to third base that Devers couldn't really get a handle of. Mountcastle ends up getting to first base. Then Jarren Duran, I always screw up that first name, but Jarren Duran, the left fielder for Boston, who has tremendous speed and physical tools, had this ball, Mullins fly out basically towards the line that he was running towards the left field line. Unfortunately, for him at least, drops the ball right in his glove, setting up Cowser for another, this time 2 RBI double, making the game 3-0 or 3-1 Orioles. In the top of the 7th, Adley had an RBI grounder into center field, scoring Gunnar Henderson, who had stolen both second and third, something we've seen Gunnar do multiple times this season. And he also has been taking third base without even a pitch being thrown, just kind of waiting it out, seeing how the third baseman is played off the bag, waiting for the right time, and just breaking towards third. And frankly, yesterday, the Red Sox pitcher tried to bounce the ball to third base with nobody really there. Devers was able to get to it, but that easily could have been thrown away and Gunnar scoring. So you see this affecting teams so much. And eventually, one or two things is going to happen. Either Gunnar's going to continue to take those bags and take advantage of the moments when he sees fit, or these teams are going to have to start playing their third baseman much closer to a line, opening up bigger holes for these hitters to get balls through. Now, you never know with baseball, you know what I mean? They start playing down the line, they start playing close to the bag, and out of nowhere, you hit it down the line, and a ball that would have gone into the outfield now is snagged by the third baseman. So, that's something that's just baseball, gang. And you can't control that all that much. It was a great thing, though, to see the hustle and the effort with Gunnar Henderson. And that's just something that this team harps themselves on and prides themselves on, and taking that extra base and being heads up and being smart. And frankly, yesterday there were a couple plays where maybe they were too aggressive and they weren't necessarily that smart. I know there was a play where we would have scored even another run that the Mullins, I believe, got thrown out at third, and the run had yet to score. It was very close, very bang, bang. I think the run went on the board and then got taken off. And then they looked at it and kept it off because it was so close. But ultimately, again, that aggressiveness sometimes can turn into outs and be negative. But it's all about understanding the moment, all about learning when to do that and when not to do that. And Gunnar Henderson is showing that most of the time his aggressiveness is well-deserved and a positive thing. Sure, he threw that ball away in Pittsburgh. I'm not going to say it cost them the game. I'm not going to say it lost them the game because he didn't put them in the situation they found themselves in, right? So I'm not going to put that on that guy. I think that was a learning experience, and I think he's been showing just how great of a player he is and just how the Orioles never stop, man. They just never stop this pressure. And that's why, one of the reasons why this offense is going to turn it around and continue to put up fantastic numbers the rest of the season, I believe. Now, in the eighth, you had a Cowser sac fly, getting him his fourth RBI of the day, making it 5-1 Orioles. After that, in the ninth, Santander had an RBI single, 6-1-0s, followed by a Mullins RBI single, 7-1-0s. Pretty sure the inning ended with bases loaded also. And so it just absolutely could have been more. But the Orioles didn't need it yesterday. Game finishes 7-1. The Orioles take care of it pretty easily. Again, get some breaks here and there. Again, there was a Cowser, the second Cowser double. Maybe shouldn't have gone after two. Gets thrown out essentially by the outfielder. But luckily, the ball gets dropped on the tag and he's able to be safe. Ultimately, it's just one of these things. That aggressiveness is great. Sometimes it can be negative. But yesterday, even though they didn't all work out or we got lucky on some of them, this team really performed great yesterday. And it was great to see them get yet another win to open up a series. This is now the fourth straight win to open up a series. And more than that, don't forget, take out the playoffs last year, take out getting swept by Texas in the ALDS. The Orioles didn't get swept at all last year in the regular season. And so far in this season, they've yet to do it again. Now, they've won all but one of those series, but they've made sure they take at least one game. And that's what the really good teams do, right? It's a good thing to win 2 out of 3 games. But really good teams, when you lose a series, at least take one of the 3 to avoid a sweep. But ultimately, winning that first game of the set ensures that you can't get swept. That's the beautiful thing about it. So let's talk a little bit about Colton Cowser and not only his day at the plate. He had 4 RBIs yesterday, like we said. The kid's first multi-RBI day in the majors. So he's been hitting the cover off the ball. We talked yesterday about how he's been really the most consistent and most dangerous Orioles hitter so far this season, at least as far as batting average goes and the amount of hits he's been getting. But yesterday, he became the youngest Orioles with 2 doubles and 4 RBIs in a game since Cal Ripken in the 80s. So that just shows you kind of these special moments. And it seems like every single day, at least one Oriole is putting up somewhat historic number or day or performance. And it's a beautiful thing to see, gang. That's what happens when you have this great of a team. Overall, in the young season, Cowser is 7 for 15 with 4 doubles. Unbelievable start to a kid that had such a tough stretch in the majors last season. He's come back, really had just a great mindset coming into this season. Got running, got it going early in spring training, kept it going pretty much all of spring training. And even though he ended spring training on a little bit of not as much of a heater, if not kind of a cooler streak, he started the season just as hot as he started the spring training. And it's great to see that kid who faced so much adversity last year and got sent back to the minors coming up and being the top prospect that we know he is and we knew he could be. And it's phenomenal to see. Getting back to Corbin Burnes, like we said, went through 7 innings yesterday. Only 2 hits, 2 walks. The 2 hits were in the first inning. So 6 straight innings with no hits given up. Only that 1 earned run, the home run in the first, and 6 Ks. His ERA is down to 1.93 to begin the season, and he's truly the ace that we brought him in to be, gang. It's fantastic to see, because how many times do these teams make these moves for these guys to bring them in, and then they're just not exactly as good as they were advertised. Well, Corbin Burnes has been just as good as advertised, if not better. I can't wait to see how great he is. And frankly, this is why we talked about Corbin Burnes for Cy Young. And Corbin Burnes with all of these different betting avenues, this is why we talked about it, gang. I still love Corbin Burnes for Cy Young. You can still get it at a good number. I love throwing it into parlays with some other award winners here and there. And frankly, I just got a great ticket, I feel like, the other day that includes Corbin Burnes for Cy Young. And if you want to know, it's also Soto for AL MVP, which I don't love. It hurts saying. But listen, that's the gambler. Sometimes you bet on things you don't want to see. The guy just walks so much, has such a great on-base percentage. And the Yankees have done good enough that makes me believe that as long as they're slightly successful, they don't even have to win the division. People just, I feel like, hold Juan Soto higher than even he is. And he's a great player, but all I'm saying is, so it's Corbin Burnes, Cy Young, Soto for MVP, and then Glasnow, Cy Young in the NL. And I bet this about a week ago, before Glasnow's most recent start, where he absolutely dominated and had 14 Ks and looked insane. Listen, I'm not saying it's won already. It's the beginning of April. But all I'm saying is that right there is a very attractive ticket you might want to look at. That's all I'm saying. So speaking of starting pitchers, we know that John Means and Kyle Bradish were kind of delayed and pushed back and on the IL to begin the season. We know John Means has already started his rehab start, having 2 starts under his belt in that rehab assignment. One not successful, one decently successful, we'll call it. Pretty good successfully, and that was a few days ago. Well, Kyle Bradish, we got some brand new news on his recovery, and it's not exactly laid out what the plan is yet. But it's beautiful for them to say that he's about to start his rehab assignment in Single-A Aberdeen, right? So John Means already started in Triple-A, and I think there's different reasons for that reasoning and stuff. I think John Means, they're not worried about pitching 100% necessarily, whereas Kyle Bradish, maybe they tell him to come back only throwing 80, 90 in these first few assignments. Again, one or the other, I don't know. Could be mistaken about that. Either way, there's no date announced yet, but they have announced that he's going to be doing it soon. So that would mean to me that odds are probably around next week, this time next week, Kyle Bradish should have a rehab start. And once you start the rehab start, heck, like John Means, it's a month. That's what they said. And I would expect that Kyle Bradish is about a month too. You know, we saw them start Kyle Bradish, let's say 2, even 3 weeks behind John Means' rehab start. I like the idea that means that if John Means is coming back at the end of this month, Kyle Bradish is coming back before the end of May. Mid-May, late May. It's definitely possible, gang, and obviously he has hurdles to get over. He has to successfully complete these rehab starts, continuing to feel good. But since the day we talked this Kyle Bradish injury, you know, there wasn't necessarily this ominous tone or vibe behind it. Because even on the first day, Mike Elias came out and said, we expect him to be a part of this team for a significant chunk of this season. And you don't say that if you're expecting that elbow injury to really be an issue with him performing and staying healthy. You don't. You just get the guy taken care of. We saw that before. But they didn't do that. They said, we're confident that he's going to be back pitching healthy for us this season, even with that little tear in the elbow. And obviously that's a scary thing to hear, and you never know when it, could pop on you and become an official tear that needs to get worked on. Hopefully that doesn't come. Hopefully Kyle Bradish is able to remain healthy, get through these rehab starts, and come back in the middle to end of May and be yet another ace for this Orioles team. Adding to Corbin Burns and adding to Grayson Rodriguez, who hopefully tomorrow has another excellent start under his belt. And these are all reasons why you have to be high on these birds, guys. You gotta be excited about these Orioles right now. All right, so we teased a little earlier about how Jackson Holliday was going to be wearing number 7. And if you know Orioles lore, if you know Orioles history, first off, you should know that this man right behind me, Mark Belanger, to me is the real number 7. And number 7 was always, maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself, but number 7 in my lifetime was essentially always unofficially retired, right? It didn't have a number in left field put up. It wasn't in the courtyard with all of the numbers. But nobody had worn it since Cal Sr. wore it the year he got fired, followed by, for the rest of that season, Billy Ripken wearing it. And then it literally just kind of got unofficially retired. Cal Sr. passed away shortly after that, and I think that had something to do with nobody wearing the number 7 for the Orioles. Now, my dad's favorite player, I've mentioned this before, was Mark Belanger, number 7. So, to me, that was also kind of another reason why I always loved the number 7 being retired, if you will. Okay, so I love the Ripkens. You know, I got the book right here. You can't necessarily see them, but there's Cal Sr., Cal Jr., and Billy right there on the cover. In every episode we have, they're represented, right? So Senior's represented, Belanger's represented. So those are the 7s to me, right? That's my Orioles 7. That's been everyone's Orioles 7 for a while now. But Jackson Holliday gets permission from the Ripken family, and I kind of wish they had found part of the Belanger family and asked them as well, but I'm sure they would have given their thumbs up. They asked the Ripken family, I believe, if Jackson could wear number 7. And I heard a story about Billy Ripken getting a text from Cal yesterday and being like, what do you think about it? And they both basically came to the conclusion that if anybody was going to wear 7, it should be this kid. Because not only are they fully confident in his potential and his talent and overall the player he's going to become, but they're very confident in the family that he was raised in and the person he is, and just doing justice to this number. Remember, his father, Matt Holliday, longtime MLB outfielder, all-star, world champion. I think the other day I said he was a Hall of Famer. I don't believe that is accurate. But neither here or there. Big all-time player. His dad was Matt Holliday. Wore 7 at least at a part of his career. I know he bounced between a few numbers, and we talked about that during one of the spring training episodes. We talked about what number would he get, and we talked about if he would reach out, or even if the Ripkens would reach out to him saying, hey, we're cool if you want to wear 7. I'm not sure how it actually went down. I know actually Matt Holliday, Jackson's dad, was on, I believe, Intentional Talk or MLB Central or one of these MLB Network TV shows that they were talking, and Billy Ripken was on as well, right? And they were kind of joking back and forth about the 7. I'm not sure, maybe Matt said something to him in there and been like, hey, he would really love it if he could wear this. Either way, the Ripkens are, quote, thrilled for Holliday to wear the number 7. And I believe that when I heard Bill Ripken talking about it, it was one of these things where, you know, this allows Cal's senior legacy to continue with it, right? Like, because technically it wasn't retired, right? So to new Oriole fans, to young Oriole fans, they might, while they might be told they might not have even seen Cal Jr. play. They might not have seen Billy Ripken play. Certainly didn't see Belanger play. They might not have been alive for even, you know, Cal Sr. being alive. So it just might mean less to them. So now with the number 7 coming back on the field, you get more conversation. You understand more about that history of that number. And hopefully, and I believe this to be true, hopefully in 20 plus years, they're retiring officially number 7 for Jackson Holliday, for Cal Sr., and for Mark Belanger. And they can all kind of be grouped together. And I think that that's absolutely possible moving forward. Obviously, Holliday needs to do a lot of good things in an Oriole uniform for that to be the case. But I think that there's a good chance that could be it. And he could be the last guy to ever wear 7. And that way, 7 became this even more of this legendary number to Birdland. Because you go back and you talk about, it was Belanger's, then it was Ripken Seniors, and then it was Jackson Holliday's. And I think there were some people in between, maybe Belanger and Cal Sr. I could be wrong about that. I know people wore it before Belanger, but ultimately, in my mind and in Orioles folklore, I think that's the path that it's going towards. And that's putting a lot on this kid's shoulders who hasn't yet even stepped on the major league field for his first game. But tonight he will, in a few hours he will. And it's so exciting that number 7 will be back. My dad's favorite number, his lucky number his whole life was 7, right? And in fact, when he would write his name was Mike. And when he would write his name, the first letter, he would go 777. Because if you put them all together, it would make M. And so that was always something cool to me. And while, 8 or 13 always was more my lucky number, 7 has always been maybe that second tier of number to me in my life and my eyes. And certainly is a number that I view as being a good number, a great baseball number, and something special. I would have liked kind of to see him in the number 1. But the idea of him carrying on this 7 legacy, while I almost planned on coming up here and saying how I was more on the fence of not liking it, I think it's settled in a little for me. And certainly the more I see him tonight, the more I see him in his career wearing that 7 and the more success he has, the better I'll feel about it. Overall, I'm very excited to have my own number 7, right? Because that's kind of it too. I want him to be this legendary Oriole wearing number 7, and at the end of it all, get that number 7 retired officially, and then it can be a celebration for all 3 of those 7s. That's how I view it. That's how I look at it. And I hope to one day it get to that point. And frankly, I hope right near those retired numbers are about 7 World Series flags that he helped bring us. That'd be nice. That'd be nice. Get me 1 first and I'll be happy. Then we can talk about 2 through 7. But ultimately, I'm starting to love the idea of him wearing 7. And I think it's really cool. And it's especially cool because, I almost have to get a Jackson Holliday jersey coming soon. And while I love the idea of number 1 on it, again, having my own number 7 in my life, kind of cool, and kind of I'm excited to have that Orioles number 7 jersey with Holliday on the back. Maybe waiting till next year till hopefully MLB figures out this whole jersey mess, but neither here or there. Soon, I hope to have a Jackson Holliday jersey, right? So the last thing I want to touch on is just how important this Game 2 tonight in Boston is. And really, the difference of being a good team to a great team, right? Now, we talked really good teams avoid being swept. And that's true. And certainly, really good teams, if you're taking consistently 2 out of 3 over a large stretch of games, it's going to be very good. Hell, if you win 2 out of every 3 games in the season, you have an unprecedented high win percentage. In fact, you might set the record for win percentage if that was the case, right? Because nobody wins 2/3 of their games over the entire course of the season. But ultimately, great teams need to be able to sweep teams, okay? And we've already had multiple opportunities in the Angels series, in the Royals series, heck, even in the Pirates series that we ultimately lost the series in. We could have won all of those games in the series. Hell, we could win all of the games in all of those, but that's getting greedy. You need to sweep teams when you have the opportunity, right? And I'm not saying they have to sweep the Boston Red Sox right now. And the Red Sox have started the season really solidly. But they did lose Trevor Story. They lost last night pretty bad. I could see the Red Sox somewhat regressing because they weren't picked and they weren't thought of as this team that really competes. Now, I mentioned in a previous episode how the Red Sox are the type of team to me that anytime everybody's picking the Red Sox to be great, that's when they stink. And every time everyone's picking the Red Sox to stink, that's when they're pretty good. But that's more of a gut feeling on how the Red Sox wind up going, and certainly has no real effect on this year and how they wind up performing. And I don't think the Red Sox are that great of a team. I think they could be in the wild card hunt when it's all said and done and pushing for a wild card spot. It's not the craziest thing to me, but certainly I don't see them as this team on the Orioles caliber, despite what the standings might show right now early in the season. And winning this second game would get the Orioles back on track to winning 2 out of 3 games at the very least, right? Which is necessary because after not doing it in Pittsburgh, you can't keep that trend. I don't need you to get it back right away, but I need you to at least get back to winning 2 of 3 right away. And that's why tonight is so important. Also because Grey Rod is starting tomorrow. And that's the type of game, if you can win the Cole Irvin start to win the series in the second game of the set, guess what? Now, with Grey Rod going at the last game, you have a real chance to sweep this team and get back to that 2 out of 3 ratio, winning 2 out of 3 in every game, right? That we dropped 1 in Pittsburgh doing. And I keep mentioning the first 36 games of the season and how important that stretch is for these Orioles because they're playing mostly mediocre opponents. The Angels, the Royals, even the Red Sox, the Pirates. Despite how good the Pirates and Red Sox have started, ultimately they're not probably that great of a team at the end of the season. So we need to do our business against these poor teams, right? And setting up that foundation is going 24-12 in this first 36. And we started the first 2 series right along those lines. We took the first one in Pittsburgh and couldn't find a way to either of the next 2 games. So it's so important tonight to come out and offensively put on a show because there's a chance Cole Irvin breaks the streak of Orioles pitchers performing so well, right? Because it's bound to happen that one of these guys has a poor start coming up soon. That's baseball, man. Statistics and things are due, and not everything's going to be great every day. And Cole Irvin had a nice start in his first start, and hopefully he continues that trend. But there's a good chance Boston's a tough place to pitch. We heard Corbin Burns talking about that yesterday. It was his first start in Boston. And between warming up in that bullpen, that's a tough situation. The fans there, just the different dimensions. Overall, he talked about, listen, I have to go out and do the same things that I always do. So the ballpark shouldn't affect me, but weirdly it does. And Cole Irvin definitely has pitched in Fenway before. I didn't look at what his record is. I didn't look at what his performance was in his career there. But I'm certain that he's had at least a couple starts in Boston, having pitched for Oakland, having pitched for Philly even. There had to have been at least a few trips to Boston that he had a start in. So, even last year for the Orioles, possibly. So, I'm not sure how he's performed in his life there. Hopefully, though, he can either keep it going or the offense can stay hot. I can't help but think with Jackson Holliday a part of this, not only are we going to see that young man have himself a night tonight, because personally, I have my money on him getting a home run. And part of me is like, it's going to take him probably at least 4, 5, 6 games to get that first dinger. And I feel like odds are it will happen in Baltimore, but I can't help but not bet it tonight. But personally, I think there's probably a better chance that he winds up with 2 base knocks, a double, and a triple. Something like that, like 2 extra base hits, not a home run, but a double and a triple, and just really showing how talented he is. Because especially in Boston, if you get the ball in one of those weird gaps or you hit it off the wall and it takes a nice ricochet, out of nowhere, a guy with Holliday speed can easily turn a double into a triple. Hell, he could possibly turn the double into a home run if it takes enough of a bounce or finds itself into a weirder crevice. So we'll see. I know the Boston outfielders defensively have been very solid so far this season, and as far as speed and arm and just metrics all around, are a good defensive outfield at the very least, if not great defensive outfield, despite what we saw yesterday from Jarren Duran. Overall, though, again, it's just so dang important to take this second game of the set. Really put Boston in their place a bit. Really put a stamp on we're back to winning series and give Gray Rod the chance to do what Burns did yesterday and get us the sweep tomorrow. That's what I'm hoping for, gang. So with that, that's been unbelievable episode. When we look back in history, this is going to be one of those moments, one of these shows that I remember for a very long time, I believe, because it is the coronation of Jackson Holliday. It is Jackson Holliday getting the call up to the big leagues. And hell, today's a holiday, gang. And moving forward, hopefully every day for these Orioles is now a holiday. And we see just how special of a player we get to add to this special, special group of players we already have. And plenty more to come, like we said, plenty more to come as far as the Orioles prospects, plenty more to come as far as their performance, plenty more to come from the Talkin Orioles baseball podcast, gang. Cannot wait to keep this rolling. You know we will be back tomorrow talking about Jackson Holliday in his first game and hopefully another huge win in Boston tonight. Gang, with that being said, this has been another episode of the Talkin Orioles baseball podcast. Let's go, O's!
Talking